On the peak of Olympus, the gods held infinite power. They created thunder, the seas, and even the destiny of mankind. But hidden behind the shining veil of mythology were tales of desire, passion, and brutal jealousy, from Zeus with his countless forbidden affairs, to Aphrodite, the goddess of love with secrets no one could imagine. The sexuality of the gods was never just about pleasure. It was the spark of tragedy, power, and wars that shook the heavens themselves. Are you ready to explore the most seductive dark side of Greek mythology? Join me as we step into a world where divine desire shaped the fate of humanity. You are watching videos on the SleepStories channel. You're an open-hearted, generous person, so giving this video a like is no big deal for you. But for me, that one like is an incredible source of motivation to keep improving and making better videos. Thank you so much. And now, let's get back to the story. Beth Danson was about 25, and besides her deep auburn brown hair and lovely face, she boasted an equally attractive body. He found himself captivated by the warm thrust of her breasts beneath the silk blouse. The clear milk of her flesh, at the V of her throat, excited him in a strange way. When he thought of her as his wife, it was frightening, as though someone had tossed him a woman and expected him to just fall into marriage. It wouldn't be hard to come to love this woman, but it would take a while. Hell, he didn't know her. She was a complete stranger who had suddenly told him they were married. There was nothing familiar about her. Even the fingers that were softly working over his face were aliens. He was lying on a strangely made bed, the warm breezes of evening rolling in off the crashing sea, and the woman stood in the ornate doorway of the bedroom. Her hair was as gold as the noon sun, and her eyes, lifting slightly at the outer curves, were as blue as the sea. Her lips petaled back over the white strength of her teeth, and her fingers made the flimsy robe drop from her shoulders. Then his fingers curled about the curve of her thigh. His fingers tightened, and the crimson smile broadened. He pulled and felt her resist him with maidenly demureness, but in the end she came to him. He felt the yielding firmness of her body pressing down into his on the bed, and his arms furled about the softness that she offered. The warm cones of her breasts worked on the hardness of his chest, and his mouth fused against hers. He left the mothership and headed for Terra. He smiled at the instrument panel and watched the operation of the big scout ship as it rocketed toward the light ribbon of atmosphere that enveloped the planet. It was a joke, in a way. In a manner of speaking, he was the first Terran to fly an alien spaceship, but he wasn't thinking of that. He was thinking of the woman, Elizabeth Danson of Everett, Pennsylvania. She was waiting, and he could see the warmth of her body, sheathed in the web-like gown that seemed spun over her turgid breasts and curved hips by an army of artistic spiders. It would not be a hard thing to love a woman like that. His fingers curled about the controls, his feet working the rudder pedals of the screaming ship as he headed for the strange darkness of the Atlantic Ocean. The spaceship was operating well, and the Earth lifted her curved bosom to meet his rush. Trouble came early. The danger lights flickered in his eyes, and the fear welled up within him like a flood. 1,500 miles an hour, and the scout ship was out of control. Trouble came early. The danger lights flickered in his eyes, and the fear welled up within him like a flood. 1,500 miles an hour, and the scout ship was out of control. The behavior of the craft was erratic, as though a giant hand was slapping the silver belly as he plummeted toward the ball of the Earth, helpless against the violent plunge. Desperately, he tried to reduce the speed of the hurtling ship, his fingers working the buttons and levers in a frenzy of determination. The craft refused to respond. She whipped into a cloud bank, headed for the sea, lifted suddenly and whirled back toward space. In an agony of fear, he realized he was no longer the master of the spaceship. He was a prisoner in a violent, uncontrollable meteor that would finally slam him into infinity, against the very Earth that was to be home. The thought tearing into his mind. In the early hours of morning, Jean Renaud of Nova Scotia fingered the wheel of his 50-foot boat through the gray ground swells of the Grand Banks, nearing the place to cast nets. The overcast sky refused to emit sunlight, and a light mist hung over the sea like a disjointed ghost. When Jean heard the worry roar of the ship, it was already too late. The silver streak whipped over his fishing boat with all the furies of the gods, nearly tearing his steadying sail away. Muttering French curses, Gene seized his radio telephone. He reported in violent tones the presence of the jet to the Coast Guard. In the half-light of early dawn, the United States and Canada whirled, with reports upon the strange craft. The CQ of the National Defense System began systematically pinpointing the track of the strange craft as it raked across the autumnal sky. Then, it was gone. Vanished in an instant. The rocketing ship had appeared over one observation station near Lake Ontario. It had been spotted by a CD worker near Auburn, New York, and then it was gone from their sight. The last observation of the craft showed it flying in erratic track toward the mountain country of Pennsylvania. At CQ Operations Office in Washington, D.C., LT Colonel Griswold frowned. He tossed the last report on his desk and pinched his lower lip thoughtfully. Colonel Delbert, sitting across from him, looked serious, weighing the possibility with concern. "It's out of control," he mused. "And it isn't one of ours. Russian might be." He studied the rugged country on the Pennsylvania-New York map, and then reached for the phone. "This is Colonel Griswold. Get me the Pentagon." At 0930, a special plane left Washington, bound for the town in northern Pennsylvania that had been chosen as a base of operations. On board the plane were the Secret Service men assigned to track down the crashed ship. But they were several hours too late, the wreck already lying silent beneath the skies. Trouble came early. The danger lights flickered in his eyes, and the fear welled up within him like a flood. 1,500 miles an hour, and the scout ship was out of control. Colonel Delbert, sitting across from him, looked serious. "It's out of control," he mused. "And it isn't one of ours. Russian might be." He looked at the rugged country along the Pennsylvania, New York map for a moment. Then he picked up the phone on his desk. "This is Colonel Griswold. Get me the Pentagon." At 0930, a special plane left Washington, bound for the town in northern Pennsylvania. That town had been chosen as a base of operations. On board the plane were the Secret Service men who were to track down the crashed ship. They were several hours too late. He awakened to flame and smoke, and it was as though he had been born again. About him lay thick, summer-cloaked forests and heavy carpets of laurel and brush. Obviously, it was some sort of plane that was burning nearby, and he had probably been in it. In his mind, he remembered only the blinding flash of white light. Then, a sea of darkness had enveloped him. Whether he had been thrown clear of the wreck, or whether he had crawled, he didn't know. But the torn flying suit convinced him. It convinced him that he had once been airborne in that battered craft. The heavy, canvas-like material of the flying suit had protected the blue serge business suit underneath, so that besides a ripped pocket, it was presentable. He grinned wryly in the pre-dawn darkness. Presentable to whom? The squirrels. He peeled off the flying suit and added it. He added it to the flaming wreckage, then staggered off through the night toward the valley below. There was usually, he recalled, water in ravines to ease the thirst. He used small saplings for handholds while his head thumped and thundered wildly. Probing fingers found a lump beneath blood-matted hair that was sensitive to the touch. There was a scratch on his cheek, sealed with dried blood, and his hands were skinned as though he had broken a fall in cinders with them. It was, he decided, amazing. Amazing that he had survived a plane crash with so little injury. But then, stranger things had happened. There was a run at the bottom of the hill, a leaf-choked creek. One of those meandering little creeks that become stagnant pools in July and August, and raging torrents of brown water in the spring, coursing through the valleys. Lying on a sloping flat rock, he thrust his face into the stream and drank deeply, feeling the life flow from the water into the weariness of his body. He washed his face in it, splashing it over his head until his mind began to function with familiar clarity. But he still did not know who he was. When he tried to search backward into the past, he could see only the white flash and the darkness. It was frightening, as if memory of his past life had been cut away. He fumbled through his pockets, found the wallet and the cigarette lighter, and began flipping through the cards with the help of the tiny lighter flame in his hands. An identification card labeled him Nicholas Howard Danson and stated that he lived at 2312 Weisman Drive, Everett, Pennsylvania. There was also draft, Social Security, and driver's license card. The others were membership certificates to various clubs and organizations. Finally, there were several pictures of himself and a woman. In fact, there were a great many pictures of the woman. One was a portrait of her, inscribed Love, Beth, which told him she was either a girlfriend or his wife. Nick extinguished the light and put the wallet away. In his shirt pocket, he found a crumpled pack of cigarettes. He shook one out, lit it, and dragged the smoke down deep into his lungs while he pondered over his newly discovered self. Of course, the proper thing to do would be to get to a phone, call the law, call the local authorities, and explain the crash. The law would help him get home and check him out. That was the proper thing, but he wasn't about to do the proper thing. He was a stranger to himself. Who was he? What was he? He could well be outside the law, a criminal. Then what? Turn yourself in, Danson, he grimaced, and discover that you are wanted by the law for something. To hell with that. Get to this Beth woman and get some answers to a few questions before you bring in the law. Apparently no one had seen the crash. No one knew he was here. Perhaps it would be better to leave it like that until he had a chance to find out what he was up against. He decided not to contact anyone. When it was light enough, he would look for a ride to somewhere. At a gas station, he could find out where he was and wherever it was. Then, by thumbing, he could get a ride to where he lived. If this Beth woman was his wife, she could fill him in. There was plenty of time to call the law later. Sleep, when he tried it, refused to come. There were too many unanswered questions rocketing around in his brain. Well, he had to find a road, sooner or later. Perhaps the more distance he put between himself and the wreck, the better it would be for him. He took a final drink of water from the creek and stood up again. His sore, battered muscles protested violently. Then he began to stumble through the Adumbral forests to find a road. It was getting light when he found the highway. It was small and narrow, bedded with pebbly asphalt with a faded white line down the middle that told him it was not a first-class road. Stretching among hemlocks, he grinned, wondering vaguely which direction he should travel to get to Everett. Finally, he pulled a quarter from his pocket and flipped it into the air, catching it deftly. Heads, I go to the right. Tails, I go to the left. Heads won, and he started off toward the right, the stiffness and weariness dragging at him like a weight tied to his legs. While he walked, he studied the pictures in his wallet, noting happily that it also contained $20 in bills. That was comforting in the emptiness around him. In the daylight, the picture of Beth that had looked pretty in the flame of the lighter became beautiful. Although it was black and white, Nick decided that her hair was brown. It swept about a soft, heart-shaped face like a cloud. The image was smiling at him, and he felt that if she was not his wife, he hoped deeply that she was his girl. It was late in the morning when he found the service station. It was a small, lonely, isolated place that sported 2 pumps and a cramped-looking lube rack. Through the open door of the washroom, Nick could see the shoes and coverall legs of the attendant sticking out from under a Ford. He'd found a dime in his pocket for a drink. He treated himself to a cold drink while he tried to figure out where he was. Across the highway, a marker told him that he was on Route 87, winding through the land. He pulled a Pennsylvania map from the rack inside the door, not entirely sure he was in Pennsylvania. Unfolding it, he found Everett and saw Route 87 ran through the town, but it was difficult to puzzle out whether he was north or south of the place. He refolded the map and stuffed it into his pocket, glancing around at the On the far side of the office was a door marked Men, just what he wanted. His clothes, his hair, and his face needed repairs before he could confront Everett's people. In a mirror, with most of the backing peeling away, he discovered that Nick Danson was rather good-looking. If you overlooked the damage, dirt, blood, and stubble shadow, the mop of tangled black hair had red splotches from the blood he'd lost. He filled the bowl with tepid water and soaped his face and hands vigorously, though it hurt. After washing most of the blood from his hair, he found a comb in a pocket and whipped some order into the matted, dark mass. The attendant was at the counter. He was an elderly man with receding gray hair, a hawk nose and grizzled features, set firmly into a face that looked like a dried apple. He grinned, gold tooth flashing. "Thought I heard someone in here," he said around the chew that pouched his cheek. "Car breakdown on the I'm walking," Nick told him plainly, and waited. "You're a long way from any kind O-town, son. Say," he said, suddenly noticing the scratch marks. "Why been fighting a bobcat?" Nick shook his head, fishing for a lie. "Got drunk last night and into a brawl. My friends pitched me out of the car in a moment of playfulness. He hoped bitterness in his tone would make it ring true. The old man chuckled softly. Darn shame, son. Yeah, from around here. New York, Nick lied. I'm staying in Everett. The old man cackled at the familiar name. Everett, hell. That's 15 miles south o' here, or better. He paused, swiveled his head and spat brown juice through the door. Ain't no one going that way, I know. S'pose you could thumb it, but it'd be hard. Lonely road, yessie. If y'ad on mind wait until after supper, I'll run y'ad on to town. Drop y'aff where you want to go. Hadn't thought of waiting so long, Nick told him. What would I do? Just sit here? Hell no. In TH back room there's a cot. Been sleepin' there myself sometimes. Since Myfe passed along back in 53. December of 53 it was. I'll wake ye, come supper, thanks. With hunger gnawing, Nick took a cellophane-wrapped pie to eat. He handed the old man a quarter. Say funny, the old man said. That don't smell like a drunk. Odd TV some liquor smell too. Why, son? I was drinking vodka, Nick said, wondering how he had pulled that from a mind that could not recall his past. He took another bite of pie as the old man gave him change, still watching curiously. Bad stuff. Vodka? That slup them Russian Hassocks drink, ain't it? I think so. Well, it ain't for Andy Hokum. Them Hassocks can have it, he grumbled. Nick was saved from further conversation by a new station wagon pulling into the pumps. A young woman, dressed in a suit, cut the engine and honked the horn briefly. Andy waved and headed for the door. Get some shut-eye, son. I'll wake Y later. Thanks, Andy. He finished the last of the pie and watched Andy work on the wagon. Nick cleared the pie wrapper off the small counter and tossed it into a box as he headed for the back room. After closing the door, he fell onto the bed and into sleep. The craft refused to respond. She whipped into a cloud bank, headed for the sea, lifted suddenly and whirled back toward space. In an agony of fear, he realized that he no longer was the master of the spaceship. He was a prisoner in a violent, incontrolable meteor. It would finally slam him into infinity against the very earth that was to be home. He was almost to the place where he would cast his nets into the water. The overcast sky was refusing to emit the sunlight. A light mist hung over the sea, like a disjointed ghost. When Jean heard the worry roar of the ship, it was too late. The silver streak whipped over his fishing boat with all the furies of the gods, and nearly tore his studding sail away. Muttering a string of French curses, Jean picked up his radio telephone and reported in violent tones the presence of the jet to the Coast Guard. In the half-light of early dawn, the United States and Canada whirled, with reports upon the strange craft. Then, it was gone. The rocketing ship had appeared over one observation station near Lake Ontario. It had been spotted by a seedy worker near Auburn, Nye. Then it was gone. The last observation showed it flying erratically toward Pennsylvania. At CQ Operations Office, in Washington, D.C., Colonel Martin Griswold tossed the last report on his desk and pinched his lower lip thoughtfully. The dream was of a woman. He was lying on a strangely made bed, the warm breezes of evening rolling in off the crashing sea, and the woman stood in the ornate doorway. About him lay all manner of bright silks and strange-colored cloths. The woman smiled and his eyes caressed her, drinking in her beauty as the dream unfolded. Her hair was as gold as the noon sun, and her eyes, lifting slightly at the outer corners, were as blue as the sea. Her lips petaled back over the white strength of her teeth. Her fingers did strange things to make the flimsy robe drop from the rounded softness of her shoulders. He watched her walk, upon curvaceous legs, to the edge of the bed. For just a second, she smiled down at him. "Father is sleeping like a baby," she whispered. He felt himself talk. Good. Then his fingers curled about her thigh. His fingers tightened, and the crimson smile broadened. He pulled and felt her resist him with maidenly demureness. But in the end, she came to him willingly. He felt the yielding firmness of her body pressing down into his, on the bed, and his arms furled about the softness she offered, their mouths fusing in a passionate kiss. "Lor, Lor, darling, you've been gone so long." Her voice was a kitten purr in his ear, warm and gentle. "I'm back, Yilla," he smiled, caressing her body tightly. She moved away from him, rolling, tugging at him to respond, but he needed no encouragement. His body rolled with her, his arms pinning her to him tightly so she could move nothing but her legs. But then there was little need to move anything else. The dream faded and he cursed and tried to get back to sleep in the beautiful woman. Sleep came, but the dream was gone. Andy, shaking his shoulder, woke him about sundown, and Nick swung his legs off the cot and stood up, still sleepy and dazed. He fingered the heavy stubble on his face and looked at the old man. "Why, can use my razor, chop off that beard, son," he said. "Come on, get around now. Got soup and sandwiches ready and some famous hokum coffee." Nick straightened his wrinkled clothing, shaking the last remnants of weary fog from his brain. Andy went on talking to him kindly. Andy said something that woke Nick dancing up completely. "Your buddies was here, couple hours ago, son." "What?" It was almost impossible to hide his surprise. Andy didn't seem to notice. Fellers Yogurt, drunk with, wanted to know if I'd seen any strangers on TH Road. I said I hadn't, figured they might slap yarn again. Thanks, Andy. Who could possibly know about the plane crash? If the wreck had been found, it would be police asking questions, not to strangers searching for him. Somebody, somewhere, was searching for him. Who and what did they want? Fingers of fear and worry flittered along his spine as he thought about the situation. When they had finished eating, Nick shaved, cleaned himself up, and followed Andy out to where his car was parked. He found that he liked the old man, despite everything. But under the circumstances, conversation was difficult. The plane crash was odd. The burning wreckage had shown no signs of wings or a tail assembly at all. But that was probably minor. The wings could have been ripped off by trees. The important thing was that someone knew he was here. That fact disturbed him deeply. As they drove toward Everett, the old man talked about the strangers who had inquired earlier in the day. "Nope," I says to the big feller. "Ain't seen a soul on foot all day. Septin, o' course, Jimmy Dilson, going down Twiller Creek to fish." That seemed to satisfy them, so they lit out. "Notice what kind of car they drove, Andy?" Nick asked. "Yep, Gabingus." They was driven a Chevrolet, looked to be a 56 or a 57. Black, it was. Blacker'n TH inside of a coal bin, with the shiniest chrome you ever saw. "Sounds like them," Nick told him, enlarging the lie. "One of them short, and the other medium." "Not exactly. The one did all the token had a funny accent. Anyways, he was about 6 feet 3 or 4, and heavy good looking with blonde hair. The other guy was about your build, with sandy hair. Never talked." "That guy? They're the ones," Nick lied and shook a cigarette from a half-empty pack. "Thanks for not giving me away." Andy nodded, lapsing into silence while Nick concentrated. Nick thought of coming home to a strange woman, and the two men who had been asking after him. For some reason, he felt Beth Danson was his wife and accepted it. She couldn't be his sister. Besides, a man his age would likely be married. He wondered vaguely how she would welcome him, but cast the thought aside for later. As they approached Everett in the twilight, Andy turned to him. "Where do you want off, son?" "Weissman Drive." "Know it?" "Yup, we're almost there. Suburban area. Just north of town. Y'all get friends there?" "Yes," Nick grinned inwardly. "That is," he thought, "I hope she's a friend. Hell, I don't know whether she hates me or loves me, but she's the only one that can help." A frightening gloom fell over him suddenly. Andy lapsed into silence, and the motor's sound became loud in Nick's ears. Nick continued to ponder the strange men and the woman he was coming home to, but it was like bashing his head against a wall. He could remember nothing concrete, and, through his thoughts, the memory of the dream returned. It was the most vivid dream he had ever had, almost as though it was real, haunting him deeply. Abruptly, Andy brought the car to a stop before a sign that read, "Weissman Drive." Nick thanked him and climbed out onto the road. The old man waved and left. For a moment, he stood watching Andy's car fade, then began walking along the road, looking for 2312 Weissman Drive, and trying to ignore the fear welling within him. When he finally found it, he saw that it was a 2-story place. White frame, trimmed with a darker color, probably blue. A garage stood beside, and a good lawn in front. There was no evidence of children. A light in the front room told him someone was home likely. Beth in caution told him to make sure no friends were with her. He slipped quietly up on the porch and looked briefly into the window. Beth was there, sitting on the sofa, reading a book, her hair brown with a reddish cast. She was every bit as beautiful as the picture he carried in his pocket. He knocked on the door. It occurred to him, after rapping, that this was his own house. Why should he rap? But what was done, was done. He waited until she opened the door and stood looking at him. He tried to smile, but Beth's eyes widened in shock. Her lips parted in astonishment. "Nick," she whispered, as though she had seen a ghost, and fell to the floor in a dead faint. Stunned, he stepped into the room. He lifted her limp body and laid her on the sofa. He began patting her face and hands to revive her, wondering what the hell he had done to cause her to faint. So, why the devil was she so shocked to see him? He wondered. Was she in love with another man, and had they rigged the plane to crash to be rid of him? He shivered. If they had tried to kill him, no wonder she fainted at the sight. The rings on her left hand bragged she was married, probably to him. But why faint at his return? He was deciding whether to stay or run, when her lashes fluttered and she came to. Her eyes dilated in astonishment, but this time she did not pass out again. Her soft arms slid about his neck, and she pulled him down to kiss him. Her warm lips caressed his face, kissing his mouth, cheeks and eyes, murmuring his name joyfully. Had news of the crash reached her? Did they presume him dead? Was that why she fainted and now rejoiced? His mind whirled with questions his memory could not answer. "Oh, Nick," she murmured. "Where have you been?" "I don't know. I've been in a crack-up, Beth. I can't remember anything." She pushed him away, alarmed at his face. "Darling, your face, you're hurt." "Just scratches," he told her swiftly. "Nothing serious. Beth, you've got to help me, please." He felt ashamed and confused, asking, "Of course I'll help you, darling. I'm your wife. Now come out to the kitchen where I can patch you up." Suddenly she burst into tears and held him close, sobbing. He held her until she stopped crying, then allowed himself to be led into the kitchen. She applied iodine and band-aids, while weariness dragged him toward darkness. Beth was about 25, auburn hair, lovely face, and an equally attractive body. He was captivated by her, yet frightened at the thought of being her husband. It was as though someone had tossed him a woman and expected marriage. It wouldn't be hard to love her, but she was a stranger suddenly telling him they were married. Even her fingers, softly working over his face, were alien. Alien, that's it. The whole damned world is alien, and I don't know who I am, who I've been. "Beth," he asked suddenly, "how long have I been gone? You act as though it's been a long while." "A long while, darling. How long?" He pressed anxiously. She looked at him seriously. 13 months, she whispered, her voice shaking. 13 months. He relaxed heavily in the chair, staring at her dumbfoundedly. Over a year. Where had he been? Why hadn't he been located before now? 13 months, he croaked. She nodded. "Every police agency in the country has looked. I've had detectives hunting. Nolan Bryce has done everything he could, but no one could. It was as though you had disappeared from the face of the earth." "Nolan Bryce?" Nick asked. "Your best friend." She realized he knew nothing. Her eyes filled, hopelessness welling. "Please, honey, don't start crying again." "I'm trying not to." He rose slowly, head thumping, and took her in his arms. Comforting her was difficult, but he tried, whispering, "It'll all come back eventually. For now, don't tell anyone I'm here. Please, don't tell a single soul." "But why, Nick?" "Because I could have killed someone. I could be a thief, a desperado. I don't know. I could even have gotten married, oh darling." She collapsed on his shoulder, crying again. "Honey, I didn't say that's what I've done," he said. "It's just that I don't know. Whatever I am, I can take my medicine. But I want to know first. You've got to understand that." She tried to smile through her tears. He knew it was his duty to comfort her. She'd been through hell, she had the memories, he did not. Despite his alien feelings, he knew she alone could help him. Whether he loved her or not was immaterial. He needed her to show him to the man he was. Perhaps it would all come back then. "I'm sorry, Nick. I'll try to help." "Thanks, honey. Hungry?" she asked, turning the flame under the coffee pot. At his nod, she said, "There's apple pie and I can whip up sandwiches or something." "Coffee and pie is fine. In a way, it'll be like courting all over again." She smiled. We'll make a whole lot of new memories to take the place of the old. I'm interested in the old ones right now, he told her glumly. Things have happened so fast, it's hard to accustom to the thing. I know, she mused softly. He looked at her steadily. Beth, when did you last see me? 13 months ago. No. I mean, where was I going? What was I doing? She remembered. You were going up to the cabin to repair the fireplace and build lawn furniture. You were going to stay overnight and come back the evening of the second day. When you didn't return, Nolan took me up to look. Your car was there, but you were gone. No clues. She shook her head. Nothing. We thought you injured yourself. But I couldn't accept that. You were always a good woodsman, even in desolate country like that. Secluded, huh? Some of the worst country in the state. We bought the place so we could get away from the mess in the city. He smiled. Apparently they had escaped one mess only to fall victim to another. She sliced him a huge piece of pie and set it before him, still smiling bravely. She poured coffee black with a lump of sugar. He forked pie into his mouth, uneasy. A stranger feeding him, loving him, knowing more about him than he did. He bolted the pie and gulped the coffee hurriedly. When finished, he glanced at the clock. Above the pink refrigerator, the clock read 9:15. Tired, dear? She asked. He nodded dully. Now, he thought, I suppose I'm to crawl into bed with her. He felt trapped, panic-stricken. But she was his wife. He'd probably slept with her 13 months before. Why the horror? We'll go to bed now, she decided. I usually turn in early. Have to work, you know? I'll sleep on the sofa, Nick mumbled. She blinked at him. You'll do no such thing. You'll march right upstairs. You'll march right upstairs to bed. Nick Danson in the die, he figured, was cast. In the final analysis, he was just too tired to attempt an explanation. Not physically worn out, but mentally. Since just before dawn, he felt on a fantastic merry. Feeling strange, he allowed her to lead him upstairs to the bedroom. The sight of one bed startled him, though it was large. She smiled coyly and forced a grin. She installed him in the bathroom, tossed a pair of pajamas and left. He took a long time showering and shaving. Then, avoiding it no longer, he went into the bedroom. She was combing her satiny hair at the dresser, now in an aqua-colored nightgown. His breath caught, then he slid into bed and watched until she came beside him. She fell to her knees, eyes shining, fingers in his hair, breasts pressing boldly on his arm as if they belonged. I love you so much, Nick, she whispered softly. He touched her cheek, alarmed yet thrilled. I love you too, Beth, he whispered. Her lips pressed gently upon his, a promise of the love waiting in her arms. A tremor ran through him as she flicked the wall switch and darkness sheathed the room. Moonlight filtered through curtains, her lithe shape molding tightly to his. You don't love me, darling. We love with our minds, but you lost yours. To you, I'm a stranger. You'll have to learn again, she said, hand clamping over his mouth. But me, Nick, it's different. I've waited 13 months. Pretend I'm anything, but make love to me. Pay no attention to anything except me, she pleaded. His mouth silenced her words in a kiss, hands smoothing down the silk. It won't be hard, Beth, he whispered. You're beautiful. It won't be hard to love you. She twisted, stripping away the nightgown barrier. He stroked her into passion, her arms pulling him close, her body both imprisoning and freeing him at once. Later, when she slept, he studied her face in moonlight before sleep claimed him. His uniform was torn by purple bushes, thorns ripping, blood streaking his trousers. His face was smeared with dirt, hand wet with sweat on the auto pistol. His stomach was tight with fear. They were out there, waiting for him, radar ready to spot him. There was no escape. Commander Imrie had bungled every assignment, and now First Baser Lore would die in the supreme blunder that had created the first uprising. He looked up the mountain face. Nothing moved, but he knew they were there. He peered into the valley. The patrol car was still, its driver grotesquely on the ground. A heavy spear pinned his chest, pointing skyward. On the slope, one enemy lay dying, greenish fluid pumping, yellow eyes blinking, slash mouth working without sound. The antennae swiveled limply, then drooped as the alien died. He clutched the pistol, saw them point left, swung quickly, but saw only desert grass swaying in faint air. They should have gotten the message. A ship was probably on its way. He checked ammunition, plenty, but only 15 shots. If they rushed him, he would be doomed. He wished he had the projectile launcher from the wrecked patrol car. Damned natives and their uprisings. He searched the sky, cold sweat trickling down his face. Scenes of other uprisings flickered through his mind, and the horrible remains of tortured captives he had reached too late. Those had been small. This one was real. The native seemed to materialize out of the ground, screaming shrill obscenities as he rose to 9 feet in height and brandished a heavy maul over his head in rage. He came leaping up the hill of tumbled rocks, and Tenny pointed at first Besserlor. Behind him came 8 more. He fired the auto pistol, ripping the alien's face. The bullet tore away one blinking yellow eye. The alien screamed and fell. He fired again and again, dropping 2 more before the charge broke into chaos around him. At a sound, he whirled, terrified at an alien behind him. The charge had been a fake, a stunt any greenspacer could see. He stared into the large eyes, then fired. Another native rose, then another, and another. He fired repeatedly, crying and cursing at the weapon's inefficiency, while above him roared the engines of rescue. Tongues of flame poured over the mass of aliens. He hoped the ship was not too late. Nick, darling. He awoke, face drenched with sweat, stomach knotted. In fright, he grabbed the woman at his side, holding her tightly. She stroked his hair, kissed his face, and whispered soothing words. "What is it, Nick?" she asked. He relaxed, laying back on the pillow. In moonlight he returned to himself. "Nightmare," he croaked. She smiled, kissed him. "Apple pie," she said. "Causes nightmares." It was so real, he muttered. "I was on another planet, in a blue uniform with yellow stripes. My name was Lore. Natives in revolt killed my driver. I was surrounded." "Science fiction," she cooed, stroking his hair. "It's a good sign. You always read science fiction. Your mind put you in the hero's place." He sat up, still shaken. "Did I cry out?" "You were mumbling, then sobbing and thrashing." He ran fingers through his hair. The dream's reality too much. It was frightening, like a memory. He stood up, patted her shoulder. "Go back to sleep, Beth. I'm going downstairs. Shall I turn on a light?" "No. It might cause neighbors to wonder. Moon is enough." He sat in the living room chair, thinking. The dream was unlike a dream, with vivid colors, violet sky, 9-foot monsters. It felt like memory, almost supernatural. Thista. It seemed a planet's name. Maybe Beth was right. Maybe confusion from a head injury. Could he believe he had lived stories he once read? What would be next? Macbeth. Treasure Island. Christ. What a world. A doctor, a head shrinker, might fix it. But what if he was a criminal? 13 months was long. Anything could happen. Maybe he had worked, eaten, loved, even married again. A psychologist. No, he needed more about Nicholas Danson first. The cabin Beth mentioned would show him little. After a year, any trail was gone, sifted by Nolan Bryce. Bryce of all friends, he had to be tied to a cop. He'd have to be careful, or Bryce would be on his trail. The crash worried him. How had he survived with cuts and bruises? Luck maybe, but had he left a clue? He burned the flying suit, tried to cover with Andy. Still odd. The suit was strange material, but burned. Almost without realizing, he stared at the car outside. A Chevrolet. Andy had described it. 2 men sat inside watching. Fear knotted his stomach as he saw the driver's blonde hair gleam. The men from Andy's station. Nick, it was Beth, framed in the doorway, alluring in her nightgown. She started to speak, but he hissed for silence. "Come here, Beth, and don't put on a light." She came to his side. He pointed out the car, explained about the men. "What do they want?" she asked, leaning on him, her breasts disturbing his focus. "I don't know. Give me a minute to get upstairs." Snap the light, move around. "They're looking for me. I'll give impression I'm not here." He knelt at the bedroom window. The light came on downstairs. The men sat in the car, watching the house. Finally the car rolled off. Lights out, then on again as it disappeared. Beth returned. "Nick?" "Here." Perhaps they saw the crash. No one saw me crash. Later, she said. A wrecked car on a highway wood car. Beth, I didn't crash in a car. I crashed in a plane on a wooded mountain. She gasped. Oh darling, don't be silly. You've never been in a plane in your life. In darkness, Nick could only stare in stunned amazement at the moonlit outline of his wife. Detective Lieutenant Nolan Bryce stood in the brush near the wrecked aircraft, watching the men move about in the light of several spotlights set up by the National Guardsmen. The thick blackness of the surrounding forest, plus a glance at his watch, told him that dawn wasn't too far away. FAA Investigator Dixon, a thin, stringy ex-pilot, stepped around the wreckage. He offered a light to the dead cigarette in Nolan's mouth. Thanks, Bryce said, and blew the smoke to the night. What do you make of it, Mr. Dixon? Dixon shrugged and pushed his snap-brim hat back. Dunno. It's pretty dark to see much, but it's no private plane. Why do you say that? No wings, no tail assembly. When it gets light enough, we'll know the story, Dixon muttered. But I don't know of any private plane that looks like that one. Then too, the Army is holding the newsboys at bay. I think those two government fellows are playing this one close to their chests. Bryce nodded and dragged on the cigarette, but he said nothing about the speed of the thing. Any bodies? Dixon shook his head. The thing is pretty well burned. Could be bodies scattered. We did find a kind of flying suit, though, badly burned and torn. Just the suit. No one in it. Dixon looked perplexed. Bothers you, huh? Me too. I can't figure it out. Oh well, it'll all come out when we really start investigating. How long does a thing like that take? Dixon shrugged. A couple of days, a week, even a few months. It's hard to say. Bryce nodded, took a final drag on the cigarette, and tossed it toward the wreck. Watching the red ash burst near the wreck, Dixon had wandered off to the far side of the crash-made clearing. Hell, Bryce thought, I'd better get that, but leaving a thing like that around here could get me in trouble. They'd think it was part of the crash. Then he saw the light glint on a small gold object. He picked it up and found that he had someone's watch. The crystal had been smashed, likely in the crash, and the hands were stopped at 4:15. The expansion band watch dispelled his hunch. He thought the pilot might have been a Russian, but it was a Belova, and he didn't think Russians had them. On the underside of the face, he could read clearly, "To Nick, love Beth," and suddenly, it was there. He knew the watch. He knew it as well as he knew his own. Hell, he had picked it up at the jeweler shop in Everett 2 years before, when Beth wanted to surprise Nick. Stunned and puzzled, Bryce dropped the watch into his pocket and decided not to say anything to Cartwell and Morgan. Maybe it would cost him later, but he couldn't tell them yet, not now. He lit another cigarette and stood there thinking about the watch. How had it gotten here? Nick didn't know how to fly a plane, and even if he had studied, could he fly something so fast? Hell no. Nor had the watch been there, in the weather, all this time. Of course, Nick could have pawned the thing somewhere, and by fate it ended up back here. Possible, but Bryce didn't believe it. It just didn't fit. Seen enough. Bryce turned and saw Cartwell standing behind him. How long had he been there, he wondered, and forced a grin. The stocky blonde grinned back knowingly. Thought you might want a cup of coffee, he said. Where the hell will you get coffee out here? Cartwell waved an arm toward the foot of the hills. A farm down there? They wake up early. Sam conned the farmer's wife into making coffee for the boys. Want some? Might as well. We have a few minutes. In fact, a lot of time before daylight. Getting tired? Cartwell asked, a little more like anxious to find out what the tale is on that wreck. You've been talking to Dixon, I see. Bryce nodded. Yeah. One thing we know, it's apparently some kind of experimental aircraft, like a rocket or something. And, if it isn't one of ours, Bryce left it hang and Cartwell didn't pick it up. For a few minutes, they walked in silence through the dew-splattered forest. They homed in on the glow of yellow lights that winked at them through the branches. Finally, they reached the dirt road that twisted along the stream bed toward the framed shape of the farmhouse. Cartwell broke the silence as they neared the place. Don't talk much about the wreck around these people, Nolan. They're nice folks, but simple-natured. They plant by the phases of the moon. The biggest event in their lives is going to the state fair. They're Lancaster Dutch, recently imported, and they believe in the hex signs they painted on the barn. Bryce nodded. Okay, John. The farm couple were strangers to Bryce, but their type was familiar. Pennsylvania was full of them. They were good people, farmers, a few jumps above the witchcraft stock that had birthed them. They were the stay-at-home type, to whom Pittsburgh was the far west, and if forced to move 50 miles away, relations would scream they'd never see them again. The woman asked them in kindly. She poured their coffee, plain appearing, with no makeup and hair pulled back into a severe knot. Nolan liked her instantly. In her own slow way, she was a fine person. Her world was the farm. Have you found that poor pilot yet? She asked, setting the coffee before them. No ma'am, Cartwell told her. She clucked her mouth, honest to true. You'd wonder why a thing like that happened. There'll be some poor woman in tears tonight. Do you think he was married? I don't know, ma'am, Cartwell said. It's the children that suffer, she said softly, then let the words trail off. Dixon came in. He smiled at the farm wife, and she poured him a cup of coffee. Dixon pulled off his hat. I'd like to thank you for being so kind. The woman flushed and waved it away. Bosh, she said, smiling. It's the least a body can do. I'd be glad to have someone helping. Were it my boy up there. Your boy flies. He did. She looked pained. He was killed during the war. I'm sorry, Dixon said, reaching for a donut from the plate. A silence fell over them as they waited for dawn. Nolan was glad to be spared conversation. He felt like a criminal, with the watch. He wanted to tell Dixon and Cartwell, but he couldn't. For the first time in his life, he was hiding evidence. He knew what the watch meant. It was personal now, and until he knew more, he'd wait. If Nick Danson had somehow come back in that wreck, and if they found no bodies, he would have gone to Beth. The whole thing would be complicated beyond belief. What would happen to her? What would happen to the woman he loved, if Nick Danson was back? He stared moodily into the dark liquid in his cup, and wondered where it would all end, as the night gave way to dawn. Nick awoke to sunlight streaming into his face, and had a momentary impression that it was dawn. Then he realized the sunlight had a reddish cast. He blinked at the clock, shocked at the time. He was amazed to find that he had slept until late afternoon. My God, he thought groggily. His headache was nearly gone, he noticed as he threw off the covers and swung his long legs to the floor. The soreness was still there, thumping dully in his stiff muscles. But sleep had been deep and brought no fresh nightmares to worry about. He cleaned himself up in the bathroom and got a pair of slacks and a shirt from the closet, still feeling somewhat like a stranger. While he dressed himself, he thought of the woman he was married to. Despite the feeling of being a stranger in a strange world, he found himself feeling delightful tremors when he thought of Beth. Even now, there was a tight, fluttering sensation in his insides when he thought of the talcumed satin of her skin, the warm lift of her brightly nippled breasts, and the strong response of her thighs. She was a beautiful woman. She was sex all rolled up in a frame of gentle curves and soft flesh. And he could see that to love a woman like her would not only be easy, it would be a privilege. He buckled the belt about his waist, trying to dispel the thoughts of the woman, and went downstairs to the kitchen. Hunger gnawed at him violently. The coffee was cold. He turned the gas on. The note on the table caught his eye. He picked it up to scan it briefly. Darling had to rush off to work. Kissed you goodbye and you said glump. Be home soon. Love you terribly. He grinned at the note, balled it into his fist, and threw it into the paper can. When the coffee was hot, he poured himself a cup and fixed a couple of sandwiches with cold meat left in the package. As he was finishing the last couple of bites of the sandwich, he heard the thud of the evening paper against the front door. For a moment, it startled him. Then he realized what it was. He was half out of the chair but paused, then sank back into his seat. He couldn't go out there and get the paper if the neighbors saw him picking it up. He sat waiting for Beth to come home. The suspense dug into his guts with ragged teeth. Had they found the plane? Were they on to him? Who were those two men? How did they know where to find him? Why were they looking for him? He drank damned near the whole pot of coffee, and watched the hands of the electric clock move with agonizing slowness. Finally, at 5:40, Beth drove up to the house and came through the door. Nick leaped from the chair. The paper, he snatched it from her hands and began tearing it open. Damn newsboys for folding them, Nick. Aren't you going to kiss me, huh? He kissed her briefly, fleetingly, and returned to the paper. The crash was on page 1, Everett Pa. The smoldering wreckage of what was apparently a private plane was found late yesterday. It was discovered in the heavily wooded area north of the city by a young Boy Scout looking for a campsite. Benjamin Talbot, aged 13, called local police who dispatched investigators to the wreck. Detective Lieutenant Nolan Bryce, Everett Rescue Squad, and FAA investigator Aaron P. Dixon examined the wreckage. "It's the most unusual crash site I've ever seen," Dixon told local newsmen. "There's no evidence of wings or tail assembly. The fuselage is also of a strange design." Lieutenant Bryce informed newsmen that no private aircraft had been reported in trouble or over that area. "One plane may have gone unnoticed," Bryce admitted. "Highly unlikely, but possible. What puzzles me is that the aircraft has not been identified, and there have been no bodies found. The Civil Air Patrol has been cooperative and are now engaged in an air search," Dixon said, while rescue squads work in the mountains. He stated that the mystery crash will be investigated. The aim is to determine the make and model of the plane and the fate of its occupants. At present, the site has been roped off and placed under guard by local militiamen. Only authorized personnel allowed. Major Gilbert Donaway of the Air Force Experimental Wing refused to say if the plane was Air Force origin. "To my knowledge, we have lost no test planes. However, a full check will be run." "Test plane?" Nick stared in amazement at the words. "Test plane? What the hell was going on in this screwy world? No wings, no tail assembly, no mayday calls, no record of the plane." The whole damned thing sounded ridiculous. Coupled with the fact that he had been out of touch for 13 months, it all became weird. And to top it all off, Nolan Bryce was one of the investigators. Suppose he, Nick, had left something at the scene. A fraternity pin, a slip of paper, anything that would link the crash to the fact that he was alive and in Everett. They'd all be on his tail. "Nick," Beth pouted, "will you pay a little attention to me for a change?" "I'm sorry, honey, but it's the plane." While she listened, he read the account aloud, and when finished, they exchanged glances. "That's the plane I was in," he told her. "But you don't know how to fly." "I must know, unless someone else flew it. That's the plane I woke up beside. I must have been in the damned thing. But I don't know if anyone else was." He buried his face in his hands. "Nick, should we call the police?" "No." Alarmed at his outburst, she put her hand on his shoulder. "All right, dear. I'm sorry. It'd have been different if those men weren't after me. I'd call the police if they weren't dogging my tracks. I'd turn myself in just to find out what the hell's going on." "Me too," she said softly. At first he didn't catch her meaning. Then he blinked. "What? The car? The black one? It followed me to work this morning," she said. "It didn't follow me home though." Nick slammed the paper. His lean jaw muscles knotted in anger. "That settles it," he snapped. "I can face whatever I'm mixed up in, but there's no earthly reason why you should be subjected to it. I'll have to get out." Beth threw herself into his arms, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Nick," she pleaded. "Whatever it is, we'll fight it. We'll make out, but darling, don't leave me again." He held her tightly against him. His hands stroked the warm softness of her back and spine. The perfume of her hair filled him with thoughts of summer fields, sweetness, tenderness, love. Nick told himself he was falling in love. "And we'll go away," Beth whispered in his ear. "We'll pack everything and go far away, where we'll never see these men again. Nick, please. Oh, please keep me with you. Going away won't settle it. They'll always be there, just outside the door. I've got to do something." He broke off suddenly. It flicked into his mind like a film of the past, like a memory. The soft face of the golden-haired girl, the backdrop of ochre mountains, the pale blue-green tree, the filmy dress whirling around her ankles. Then she was coming back, arms outstretched, kissing him lovingly. He clamped it from his mind, a memory that made no sense at all. A tremor of fear ran along his spine and trembled in his flesh. What did it mean? What was happening to him, Nick? It was Beth. "You look pale and frightened." "Nothing. We'll go away," she beamed. "I know just the place, the cabin, far up in the mountains. No one will know we're there. We'll learn to love each other again." You have to work, he said. She nodded. That's true. Still, you could go up there and try to puzzle this all out. I can come up in the evenings and on weekends. Might be a good idea, he admitted. At least I'll be safe there. Then it's settled. You go sit somewhere and I'll get things packed. She whisked away, almost running up the stairs to pack some things. He walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stood quiet. Through the window, twilight faded into evening, heavy purple clouds sweeping steadily across the sky. A star winked later Venus. He picked out many others as they flickered into being. She came into his arms and talk was insignificant, unnecessary. Her arms wound about his neck, fingers tugged playfully at his hair, and she smiled at him. His lips moved down against hers. They were lost in themselves. He felt the taut pressure of her breasts playing against his chest, the firm roundness of her thighs working against his. Her strong fingers worked on his shoulders. She pulled him down onto the moss beneath the strange tree, her body molded into his. His hands stroked her breasts beneath the filmy cloth. Her hands pulled the straps down from her shoulders. He helped, working the straps down until the firm mounds of her breasts lifted their coral-tipped nipples toward the sky. His fingers kneaded them while his mouth worked on hers passionately. When he released her lips, she pulled his face down into the twin cushions of her breasts. His hand moved caressingly against the flesh of her thighs. Ready, dear, it was gone. Just like that, a sudden flickering memory of some long-vanished event that might have given him hope. It had been fantastic, with strange colors and weird landscape, but he wanted it despite that. She stole it away. He turned and smiled at her as she came into the kitchen. She had turned on a soft light in the front room, but let the kitchen remain dark. In the half-light, she was the most beautiful woman he'd seen. It would not be hard to love her, he thought again. He took her shoulders, pulled her gently against him to kiss. Her mouth moved against his, satiny with desire, until they parted. I'm ready, if you are. For what, darling? The bedroom? Or the car? He chuckled. The car. The bedroom will keep until we're up in the woods. In the glow of the headlights, the car swallowed the road voraciously, and they moved toward the North Country. Now, he noticed, on Route 87, they had not been seen leaving the city, nor had they been seen packing the car. The garage had a door that led into the kitchen, and Nick had laid on the back seat floorboards until they were in the country. Now, sitting in the front seat, he wondered vaguely if Beth, in her joy at having him home, had given herself away to her friends. He hoped not. He glanced sidewise at her. He noticed that she drove with a smile on her face. Is it far to the cabin? He asked. Not now. We're almost to the turnoff. He lapsed again into silence, the old questions whirling. Who were the men who were after him? What did they want? How much had the FAA learned of the plane? Had they found something to pin it on him? What were these fleeting thoughts? Was his mind trying to tell him something via the nightmares? And what of his best friend, Nolan Bryce? Where has he been? What is he up to? It struck Nick as odd he hadn't encountered him. Surely he and Beth had been close the past year. How close? Suppose Bryce stumbled upon Andy Hokum. Would the old man talk? Feeling more helpless than he ever had, Nick stared at the road. Beth turned off on another road, little more than a wagon track beside a small creek. A few minutes of bouncing over ruts and stones, and she turned off again, parking beside a gray frame cabin. Here we are, darling. They got out, each taking a box from the back seat, and Nick followed her up the stairs to the porch. Beth set her box down and found the key. The lock clicked open. Wait till I find the light, Nick, she whispered. A moment later, the light snapped on and a soft glow filled the front room of the cabin. They carried the boxers to the kitchen, then returned. Nick studied the place. He liked the room. There was rugged manliness in the stone fireplace, and knotty pine walls, mingled with Beth's femininity. It was well laid out, with oil paintings on the walls. Like it? Beth asked. He nodded. But it doesn't bring back any memories. No, hell, honey. I can't even remember what I did for a living. She smiled sadly. Want to see? When he nodded, she motioned him to the other side of the room and opened the door. She flicked on the light and he stepped into a small study filled with the trappings of an artist. Tubes of paint lay on small tables. beside cans of turpentine, lacquer, and old paint rags. A half-finished nude adorned one of the easels. Watercolor sketches and oils were scattered about the room. Want to see some of your favorite models? He nodded numbly, and she drew open a drawer, pulling out 4 large oil paintings done on commercial painting boards. The first 2 were of Beth, one nude and the other semi-nude, with only her lovely breasts exposed. The other 2 were of a girl unfamiliar to him, one seated before a table with a vase of flowers. A good-looking girl with jet black hair and a soft, warm face. The next painting showed her as a Hawaiian dancer, skin a trifle darker. She was pretty, but her face and body didn't ring a bell. "Who is she?" he asked. "Her name is Janet Holman. She lives 4 or 5 miles from here, on her father's farm," Beth said. "You have her file over there with your records. Doesn't this ring a bell?" "No." She looked at him sadly. "I hope it'll come back, darling." He reached out and pulled her to him. "It'll come back," he whispered. "Come on. I want to build a fire in that fireplace. It's cool in here, even if it is summer." They went back out to the front room. Beth found kindling while Nick wadded newspapers and stuffed them in the fireplace. She brought it. He lit the fire. When it was going good, he added a couple of logs, snapped off the light, and grinned. "I like firelight," he told her. "It's restful." She smiled back. "Restful. I think it's sexy," she teased. She had kicked off her pumps and was lying before the glow of the hearth on the thick rug. He arranged the mesh screen before the fire and laid down beside her. "Sexy, huh?" "Uh-huh," she said. "I don't know, darling. The warmth of the fire warms me up, I guess." He grinned and dropped his head to the cushions of her breasts. Her fingers played in his hair. "I'm glad," he told her. That used to be our favorite way of spending an evening, laying in front of a fire," Nick asked. "Not just any fire, darling. This particular fire, sans clothes. Sounds like fun," he mused and rolled over to kiss the ripe redness of her lips. Her tongue stabbed a blade of passion at him, and her arms pulled him close. Then, after a moment, she shoved him away. She stood up. He propped himself on one elbow and looked at her. Her smile was impish as she unfastened the buttons of the white blouse and pulled it from her navy blue skirt. Her fingers unhooked the snaps of the bra and dropped it to the floor beside the blouse. The firelight was golden against her breasts and the flat expanse of her stomach. Nick felt the thunder rising. It slammed through his veins with the holocaust of a napalm bomb, exploding as she unzipped the skirt and dropped it into a puddle on the rug. He watched, pounding, as she stepped free, clad only in the pinkish transparency of her panties. Then they too were gone, and Beth was smiling down at him, passion spearing from her eyes. "Will I still do?" she asked. "Do what?" he croaked. "You know, will I still do as a model?" he chuckled. "A model, sweetheart, is a small imitation of the real thing. You don't look imitation to me." He grabbed her arm, but she jerked away. "Oh, no, you don't. You have to undress too." He grinned and peeled off his clothes quickly. She came into his arms then and they made love, letting the glowing warmth of the fire caress them hotly. His hands smoothed her breasts while his mouth worked at the fire that was coming to life throughout her body. "Just like old times?" he asked softly. "Better, darling?" "Much better." Sometime near midnight, Beth took the car and went home. Nick poured a cup of the coffee she had made for him and went back into the study to look at the paintings a second time. It was good, professional work, and he wondered if he could do the same stuff again. "Hell," he decided, "it'll be a long time until I get back at an easel." He finished the coffee and went up to bed. It took a while to get to sleep. Thoughts of the wrecked plane, Beth, the strange men, and Nolan Bryce kept running around in his head without finding answers to the enigmas they presented. Finally, he slept. He was looking at himself, in the dream, but it was not in a mirror. He was standing inside a polished room, and the other Nick Danson lay on a bed wrapped in sleep. Nick blinked at the still duplicate of himself on the bed, and turned away to look at the room. It wasn't large. It was some kind of bedroom, well lighted although no lights could be seen. The walls seemed to glow, and everything was of bright metal. The mirror caught his eye, and he saw himself in the same blue and yellow uniform he'd worn before. The other Danson lay asleep. That Danson was dressed in blue dress pants and a white shirt. The tie had been loosened at his throat, and the clothing was wrinkled badly. Suddenly, the other Danson opened his eyes and looked at Nick. For a moment, he appeared startled. Then he smiled. The smile erupted in a chuckle that became a laugh. The other Danson's face grew large and full, roaring with laughter at Nick until the scene changed. It changed from odd curiosity to absolute horror. The kind of horror that comes only from peals of loud, echoing laughter rolling through the caverns of the mind. Nick awoke, gasping, drenched in sweat. His heart hammered in his chest like a drum, threatening to leap to his throat at any moment. He looked around anxiously for Beth, but the silence reminded him she had gone back to the city and her job. Dawn was breaking and dim light filtered through the unwashed windows. There was little point in trying to sleep now. Might as well get his clothes on and try to start unraveling a long thread of odd events. He pulled on his clothes slowly and slid his feet into his shoes, wondering where to begin the climb back to himself. With people closing in on all sides, the whole damned thing seemed impossible. He hooked the last button on his shirt, stuffed it into his pants, and headed for the kitchen. He warmed up last night's coffee and it tasted like warm sulfuric acid, but it brought him to full consciousness, even if his stomach objected to it. When he had finished the coffee, he found the library in the den and began reading a few titles. A lot could be told from a man by his reading habits. There were books by Bridgman, Zandenberg, and Loomis. Almost everything on the shelves pertained to art in some form or another, except for the last row. There were about 15 science fiction volumes, mostly collections of short stories, from Asimov to A.E. Van Vogt. He had a fleeting idea to start reading them to see if his strange dreams came from the pages. Then he rejected it as too time-consuming. He shoved a copy of H.B. and Piper back onto the shelf and straightened. To hell with it. He had the whole house to search, before fumbling through something as far out as science fiction. He searched systematically. When he finished, it was noon. He knew a lot about the cabin, but damned little about himself. The cramped attic held only old pictures, odd furniture, and ruined clothes. The 3 bedrooms revealed nothing, just the usual gear. Of the downstairs, only the art studio and the den library were of interest. Even these places shed no light upon the ghost of the man haunting him. The studio contained the trappings of an artist, battered but intact. The den was wall-to-wall like a woodsman's lodge, filled with books, stuffed heads, and of course, the guns. The rack on the far side held bullet-loading equipment, cans of DuPont powder on the floor, and above, the weapons enough to hold off a small revolution. 2 handguns, 3 rifles, and a shotgun. A Smith & Wesson Tigaplu Model Tigaplu and a Ruger Blackhawk .44 Magnum, like the old Peacemaker. A Marlin saddle carbine, a Winchester African rifle, .458 bore, and a Stevens .410 single-barrel shotgun. Nick grinned at the arsenal and took the .44 Magnum down to clean it. It wasn't too bad, even after being idle. The holster and gun belt still contained enough oil to make them pliable. He slipped the Magnum into the holster, buckled the gun belt at his waist, letting it hang low. To hell with it, he thought. If those 2 characters show up, at least I'll have an edge. He pulled 5.44 special slugs from the belt and loaded the weapon, careful to leave the hammer on the empty chamber. Then he decided to see how good he was with it after all this time. Behind the house, where the hill rose sharply, Nick lined up 5 cans at the base of the rise. He snapped off 5 fast shots, as quick as the action would operate. All 5 cans were blown to hell. Stunned but satisfied, he reloaded the revolver and dropped it back into the holster. He prowled the grounds aimlessly, looking but not sure what for. Beyond lawn furniture and tools, only the creek remained. A fast-running stream, barely a foot deep, but full of trout holes. He walked along the gurgling water for a while, then went back to the house, still unsure what to do. He shoved the door open and froze. She was just like the painting. Her raven black hair hung loose and free, shorts and halter, revealing warm flesh rising and falling temptingly. Nick stood there, speechless. It was Janet. The light in her eyes made him wonder what kind of man he had been. She gasped with pure pleasure, flung herself into his arms, planting the ripe sweetness of her lips squarely on his. Janet, he managed, but she had a stranglehold on him. Russian? Bryce asked, looking at Sam Morgan. The dark-complected Fed pulled the mangled cigar from his mouth and pointed it toward the twisted wreckage. On the far side, Cartwell and Dixon looked. Why not? Morgan asked. It seems outlandish. Somehow, Morgan grinned, his peg-like teeth flashing. You small-town cops are good, but you look at everything from a local viewpoint. In our business, you broaden, you might say. Look at the facts, Nolan. Defense spotted the thing up north. Radar clocked it at over 2,000 miles per. So it crashes, and we find no wings, no tail. And I have the hunch that the damned thing ran on nuclear power. Atomic, Nolan whispered, amazed. While Morgan spoke, all Bryce could think of was the watch. How could Nick pilot such a craft? You mean, atomic power? Morgan nodded. See that funnel-shaped gizmo with the round ball-like affair? He pointed to what was probably the tail of the ship, not the part smashed into the ground. That's a nuclear reactor, Sam went on. Uncle Sam doesn't have anything in the air with that kind of power. Maybe a few engines on test, but nothing flying yet. Then it is Russian. That's my guess. No other country would build it. Great Britain could, but theirs would show the red and blue targets. To me, it looks like a glorified U-2 on their side. Bryce didn't answer, staring at the wreckage. A million thoughts burst in his brain. Nick Danson was in this. He flew it. Where did he get it? Was he a Russian spy? He lit a cigarette. How come it didn't become a Hiroshima, if atomic powered? Morgan grinned at him like a kid. I said atomic energy, not atomic bombs. There's a difference in hey Sam, come here. Both turned. Across the wreckage, Cartwell held up a piece of metal, excited. Come on, Nolan, Sam grinned. Let's see what my buddy dug up. I'll bet it's a Russian manufacturer's trademark. They trotted over Russian, huh? Asked Sam. Russian, hell, Cartwell snorted. It looks like a cross between Chinese and Arabic. Sam studied it, then passed it to Nolan. He didn't know languages, but these marks resembled Chinese, yet weren't the same. Strange, unfamiliar. There are similar markings on the control panel, Dixon said. Crap, Sam Morgan snorted. I say Russian. How about you, partner? Cartwell frowned. I'd rather let an expert look this piece over. He turned to Nolan. Where can we find an expert, Bryce? Everett College is the only place I know. Okay, we'll give them a try. Where's Lieutenant Peters? Over there, Sam said, chewing his men. Sam, remind him to keep everyone off the site. I hate newsboys scooping us. Sam nodded and left. Anything for me? Dixon asked. No, just arrange to haul it to Everett, but check with me first. They wrapped the metal in Cartwell's jacket and headed through the forest. Professor Nichols, short and frail but brilliant, met them at Everett College. A famed linguist, he peered with sharp small eyes. Bryce introduced everyone. Cartwell handed him the medal. We'd like to know about the writing, Sam said. Nichols studied it, then smiled thinly, as if at a bad gag. Are you playing some sort of joke? The government doesn't pay us to play jokes, Cartwell said. Do you know the language? Nichols shook his head. I know every spoken and many dead languages. I don't know this one. You're serious? Yes. No language on Earth, dead or alive, matches this. We aren't joking, Nolan said. Then someone plays a joke on you. No linguist can identify it. Where did you get this? Sorry, Professor, can't disclose, Cartwell said. Also, please forget it. Government business, of course. Is there anything else? I have a class in 3 minutes. No, that's all, thank you. As the door closed, silence fell. Cartwell stared out the window, Nolan at the strange writing, like an ethnologist over missing link bones. What now? Sam asked. Call a Martian for his opinion. It's not funny, Sam. Don't I know it? Sam shot back. We've got some kind of tiger by the tail here. Bigger than the Kremlin. How will this sound in a report? Cartwell snorted. You write it. You go to hell. I like my job and I don't want to get booted for a science fiction twist. What's next? Nolan asked. Back to the wreck, I guess. Cartwell shrugged. Sam slammed his fist on the table. John, don't you see? If the professor's right and this gibberish isn't Earth language, we got problems. We've got a flying saucer, a spaceship. My God, Sam, cut it out. I refuse to believe in them. Sam snickered. Doesn't matter what you believe. Like a Ford V8. It's there. Jesus, Cartwell whispered. And worse, we didn't find a body. Unless remote controlled. It had a pilot wandering now. A wounded little green man running around trying to hitch a ride back to Mars. It'd be funny if it weren't so damned serious. We'd better get back, Cartwell said. Maybe rescue squads found something. Coming, Bryce, Nolan grinned. With little green men running around. Then serious? I'll be up later. I have something to do down here. Morgan snorted. See if you can find a Buck Rogers ray gun. They left. Nolan sat behind his wheel, watching them drive off, mind whirling. Flying saucers, Martians, little green men. Impossible, ridiculous, but true. You couldn't refuse to believe in lightning. It all fit, crazy but true. Nick Danson, artist, disappeared 13 months ago. Every agency failed to find him. It wasn't the Earth, it was the sky. Martians, or whatever they were, had taken him. Why? To replace him. To send an alien in his place. That explained the watch. It wasn't Nick piloting, but an alien. Beth had an alien, posing as Nick, reached Beth, and used her for their plan. How many missing persons were tied to this? How many aliens walked Earth now? To hell with that, Nolan roared at himself. The important thing is Beth. He had to stop it before something happened. He started the car, slammed it into gear, and gunned it out onto the street, tires screaming protest. Janet was more than a beautiful woman and a good model. She was white heat and surging womanhood, all dolled up in a body like that of a French movie star. She was as wanton as a Polynesian dancer and as demanding as a nympho. Lying there beside her relaxed nakedness, Nick Danson felt like another man, a tired one. He laid his hand over the swelling rise of her breast and slid it down the flat velvet of her stomach. She made a small sound in her throat and kissed him on the cheek with lips like branding irons. I'm glad you have amnesia, she cooed against his ear. Why, for God's sake? She snuggled the curling warmth of her body against him and chuckled. Because of this, you used to kiss me, but that was all. I wanted more, but not you. He blinked at the ceiling at her words. She'd tricked him. She'd cheated. All the time he'd figured she was some sort of mistress, but in his other life he'd never given her a tumble. It was funny, in a way you mean. We never. Nope, she chuckled again. Aren't I a rat? Vixen is more like it. That's a good word. I like it. Janet Vixen. How would you like to kiss Janet Vixen, Nick Danson? Suppose I get another knock on the head, he suggested, and I lose the memory of all this too. Then what? I won't embarrass you in front of company. Come on, kiss me again, stranger. He rolled over and kissed her again and, tired or not, desire surged through him. Her small hands dug into his shoulders, her teeth nibbled his neck, and she laughed at the risks of wild love. Nick thought if he tried to get serious, she'd bounce him fast. But it was impossible to think of that with her. Besides, he was having too much fun, even if he was left too weak to move. I have to go, lover, she said finally. Beth might come up, and she'd be apt to get a little put out if she caught us in bed. That's putting it mildly, he grinned. Besides, I have to start trying to find out about myself. Do me a favor and don't. She pecked him lightly. I like the new Nick Danson a hell of a lot better. Come on, snap my bra. They climbed out of bed and he helped her into her shorts and halter. She kissed him lightly again, said goodbye, lover, and bounced out into the hall, leaving him naked in the bedroom. What a world, he thought for the 100th time, and began to gather his clothes. When he put his pants on, his wallet dropped from the hip pocket and flopped open on the floor. He picked it up, his eyes noticing the card in the plastic window. A selective service registration certificate, written small scar on right forearm. He glanced at his arm and froze. There was no scar. A man cannot lose a scar, he told himself. He checked the card again. It was his, Nicholas Howard Danson, but the scar was missing. He was not Nicholas Howard Danson. Who was he? What was going on? Had he killed the real Danson and stolen his ID? Why? Was he escaping from crime? Was he a criminal? What did the strange dreams have to do with it? Numbly he dressed, strapped on the .44 Magnum, hands shaking. It was only a matter of time before those at the wreck figured it out and came after him. He had to get out. The screech of brakes startled him. A police car in the lane, a plainclothes cop got out. It could only be Nolan. Bryce pulled his police positive and headed toward the house. Nick hauled out his magnum and fired. Bryce dived behind a bush as the .44 slug barely missed. The .38 barked back, splinters flying. "Come out, you fool," Bryce roared. "You go to hell," Nick yelled and fired again. "Who tipped you off?" "Nolan, Beth. You left Danson's watch where your flying saucer cracked up." Bryce snapped another shot. "Flying saucer," Nick blinked. "What the hell was that cop talking about?" "What did you do with Nick?" Bryce roared. Nick emptied the magnum wildly, never hitting him, then reloaded frantically. As Bryce sprinted toward the house, Nick yanked the hammer back but suddenly. In the yard, Detective Lieutenant Nolan Bryce vanished into thin air. His yells rose, fading straight upward. Nick stared dumbfounded. What the hell was going on? Then a shout at the cricket was the two men from Andy Hookham's gas station. Panicky Nick fired and the blonde dived for cover. "The dumb bastard is shooting," the blonde yelled. "Let's get the hell out before he hits something." Nick snapped another shot to hurry them along. Just as Beth's car rocked up the road, she leaped out, yelling for him. He went down to meet her, gun in hand. Her face was drained of color. "Nick, where's Nolan?" "Oh my God, Nick, have you killed him?" "I couldn't hit him," Nick told her. "I emptied the magnum and he disappeared into the air." His eyes wild, right into the air, he added inanely. Everything was crazy. He wasn't Nick Dent. Beth stared. "You killed him," she breathed. No. He vanished. Honest to God, I never even came close. I might as well have thrown rocks. Men do not disappear into thin air, she said. Forget that. How do you know I was here? She sighed. He found the watch I gave you years ago. It was at the crash site. He came to me warning my life was in danger. Nick, what have you done? I didn't know. He lied. How do you know where to find me? He helped you build the place. Now where is he? God damn it, Beth. I told you. He vanished. Stop yelling at me. Then believe me, it happened. If you find his body out there, I'll eat it. She cried and hugged him. I want to believe you, but men can't vanish. Bryce did. All right, if you say so. Now what? I don't know. I have to remember what happened. It's the only way this crazy world will make sense. She nodded. Let's go in. Let me have the gun, dear. He stared. You think I'm nuts? Crazy? Of course not, darling. But give me the gun. Resigned. He handed it over. I don't blame you. Hell, I think I'm crazy too. She didn't argue. They sat staring into the dead fireplace as dusk fell. Beth started the fire, then kissed him. Why don't we get some sleep, honey? I'll be up later, he said. She went to bed. He sat lost in thoughts, trying to find the key to his past. Bits and snatches came, but incoherent. Dreams suggested one conclusion, too fantastic for belief. He never heard the door open slowly. A handkerchief of chloroform clamped over his face. He struggled, but powerless. The chloroform got to him. He couldn't breathe. He slept. The ship came to rest upon a flat, ochre-colored plain beside a brilliant white city encased in thick, heavy walls. There was a dull pain in his head and fire in his leg, but he was alive. He lay limply upon the bed while First Baser Narvi plied him with honey wine to dull the pain. He grinned, studying the blonde giant's warm, friendly face. He was among friends now. The tall, yellow-eyed Thistians had failed to kill him, and Narvi had whisked him away into the violet sky. Thought we'd lost you. Lord Narvi grinned. You almost did, he replied. He choked on the Thista honey wine. Haven't you anything else? Something from Darkin? Sorry, friend, Narvi grinned, but be glad to get this. The 36th Command has been drinking up even this. I'll see you later, in the hospital. All right, Narvi. The big man started away, but Laura stopped him by grabbing his sleeve. Narvi, yes, thanks. Thanks a lot. First Baser Narvi punched him playfully on the arm and left the compartment. The medical men came in, hooking anti-gravity capsules to the bed and setting them into motion. The cot-like stretcher lifted and the men towed him to the freight elevator. As they stowed him into the ambulance, he saw Narvi's car skimming toward Commandant's building to make a report. No doubt Commandant Imri would be coming to see him later on. Nick groaned. Another dream that was beginning to clear things up a little. He's coming around. The words weren't English, but Nick understood them. The big blonde cursed softly. Speak English, Thesa. Someone might hear you. There hasn't been anyone around this farm in months, Thesa replied, lapsing into English. But if you're getting particular, don't call me Thesa. Nick opened his eyes and blinked. It was the two watchdogs, the blonde and his sandy-haired friend. The giant was grinning at him. Hello, he beamed. Remember me? No. Who in hell are you? Nick struggled to get out of the chair he'd been dumped in, but was pushed back firmly. When you didn't report, we went out. The old guy at the gas station covered for you, so we had to watch Beth's house. Used tricks, Lore. Why didn't you make contact? You're Narvi. Nick stared. You're the man in the dream. Dream? What's wrong with you, Lore? You refuse to report. You take pot shots at us. That crash was bad. Don't tell me your head, Narvi. Thesa cut in quickly. He was lucky to survive. Maybe he can't remember what went on. That right, Lore? Nick stared as foggy pictures swung in his mind. Galaxy's world, silver ships streaking, light across ochre deserts, men in blue drilling. It was real. The fears he had, the crazy dreams, it was all real. It wasn't a dream, Nick muttered. I really am first baser, Lore, and I know you. I know you. Take it easy, boy, Narvi said. You've had a bad time. Thesa, get some water. I'm all right. He looked at Narvi, memories fluttering into place. The amnesia slipped aside. The veil began to rise. You're sure you're all right? Yes, Narvi, things are beginning to make sense. Tell me about what I'm doing here. Narvi cursed. Commander Imri, the stupid thistlebug. It's all his fault. All this fouled up thing is his doing. It would have been bad enough without your ship crashing. That just added to it. Luckily, Imri has been ordered back. Someone back home heard of his idiotic plan, and the government yelled. What plan? I can't. Thesa handed him water, and while he sipped, Narvi explained. After we finished campaigning on Darkin and Thesta, we applied for assignment in this galaxy. They wanted to split us up, but we got mad, so they shipped us here under Imri. After years Terran time, studying on Mars, we became agents here. I got an easy one with Thesa. You, bigger plans. Damn him. But why are we spying on these people, Narvi? For war, I hope not. The Terrans are close to space travel, and you know what that would do to our colonies in this galaxy. They're entering a primitive atomic civilization, like children with weapons. They're careless and likely to ruin the planet in wars. Sounds like the ancient history of our own planet, Lore said. True. You know what happened to us? Damned near lost the whole planet. Since Terra has life like ours, we could use it as a link in the supply chain. That is our main purpose. Trade. But these people fear what they don't understand. Anything they can't understand, they kill. So right now, we're sending agents with instructions to probe. They're coming along rather well. Getting out of the trees, you might say, but we'll keep an eye on them. Lore finished the water. But what has this got to do with Imri and me? Apparently I was to take Nick Denson's place. That was Imri. Agents must live with people, get jobs, settle. Imri picked Danson, a footloose artist. All he had to do was snatch him, do plastic surgery on you, and put you in his place. You then could roam the planet without question. That's crazy, Lore said. I couldn't take Danson's place for life. He gambled too much. You're a good spacer. You follow orders. When you left the ship, you were Danson processed so well. No one could tell. When you crashed, a blow on the head must have created amnesia. We had a time locating you. Anyhow, you're to go back to the ship soon. The new commander wants to talk with you. Narvi grinned slyly. You'll want to talk to him too. It's Zark, our old friend from Thesta. Yes, I remember him. Lore paced the room. He remembered gray-haired, friendly Zark, and also Commander Zark's beautiful blonde daughter, Diela. I remember a lot now, Narvi. It's too bad they didn't send him sooner. Things wouldn't be so messed up. It's not so bad. No. You'll probably be going back to the home planet now. I can't go back, Lore mused. I have to stay and see this through. It's personal now. Personal, Narvi was puzzled. What can be personal about a spacer and an alien race? He looked levelly. Because of Beth Danson. I can't leave this planet, Narvi, because of Beth Danson. I'm in love with her. Love, Narvi exploded. In the heavy silence that followed, the two men stared at one another. Lore regarded his friend with calmness, but Narvi's mouth was open in astonishment. The situation wasn't covered. Love, Narvi choked finally. With an alien. You must be joking. I'm serious. That blow on the head must have been solid as a rock. Thesa just stared, without speaking a word. Beth is a wonderful woman, and I'm in love with her. If the blow on the head did that, well then, I'm glad the ship cracked up. But, Lore, she's an alien. It's crazy. You couldn't live here. She couldn't live with you. Lore shrugged. What about Yella? Narvi demanded. He didn't answer. Memories of the blonde woman with trim ankles, slim waist, and large breasts floated back. Memories of evenings they'd shared under the stars. He sat fingering the thoughts without feeling. Finally, he was aware Narvi was speaking. Know how you feel, Lore, but forget it. You could never work anything out. Go on back to Eula and forget about this alien. It doesn't matter how wonderful she is. Nothing short of killing her husband would gain her for you. Lore smiled thinly. We can do that too. He paused and looked thoughtful. What did Emery do with Danson? Nothing. He lives better than most spacers. Under guard in your quarters. Commander Zark hasn't figured out what to do with him yet. That's what he wants to talk about. Have you a scout ship here? Certainly, we use them to make reports. No radio waves. How about a uniform? You can borrow one of Thessa's. You'd never get into mine. Fine, as soon as I'm attired. We'll see, Zark. Grinning at Narvi, Lore followed Thessa into the bedroom. Later, dressed in the uniform of a first spacer, Lore checked himself in the mirror, making sure he was dressed. Trousers bloused neatly, stripes aligned, cuffs fastened, emblems on the collar, the patch of rank on his sleeve. Yes, he was set, precise. He grinned at Thesa. Feels good, he said. The sandy-haired spacer handed him the black leather belt with the auto pistol and cartridges. He buckled it on, feeling the weight drag at his right hip. Okay, Thesa asked. Lore nodded. Thanks for the loan, he said, and went out where Narvi, already dressed, awaited him. How's your head? Fine, let's go then. They walked wordlessly to the barn. The blonde snapped on a small light near the scout ship, and Lore examined it closely. Climb in, Narvi invited. I have to scan the area to be sure no one will see the takeoff. Lore leaped to the cockpit, dropped lithely into the seat, feet on pedals, hands fingering the controls. So much was coming back, remembrances each second. He was not Nicholas Danson. He was First Spacer Lore of the 8th, Terran Command, thrilled to the knowledge of who he was. It was slow, this strange process of regaining his mind, but it was coming along. He would soon be whole again, no longer some freak caught in the vortex between two worlds. Ready? Narvi asked. Ready? Where's the starship? Bearing 204.5, off-planet. We'll be there in no time. The barn door swung open as Narvi started the scout ship, and they moved out into the night. Hovering? They hovered a foot off the barn floor until outside. Narvi conned the ship, working the verticontrol expertly, and the craft whistled upward. The radar disclosed no aircraft in the area. Narvi grinned at Lore and shoved the speed control, working the elevators as the scout ship streaked into the night sky home. Lore, watching the screen, saw the oblong shape of the mothership. He called out its position. Narvi altered the course, whipping the scout ship onto a collision bearing. Close enough, they used their signal and heard it answered. The ship slipped in easily. The port opened in the starship's side. Narvi guided the craft with tender hands, settled it on the floor. A positioner hooked a line and pulled it into the repair bins. The area was pressurized. They climbed out as repairmen went to work. Narvi slapped Lore on the arm. I'm going below for a drink. Join me. Lore shook his head. No thanks. I'll talk to the commander first, right? Just don't tell him you're jilting his daughter for an alien, or he'll turn purple. Lore grinned, watched him stride away to the elevator, then walked off toward the forward end of the ship. He would find his future father-in-law, Commander Zark. Spacer saluted him in the traditional manner, hand clasped to hip holster. and it felt good. He had almost forgotten that. The guards stopped him outside the door, but when he explained, they nodded. One pressed a button, opening the door to the vestibule. Lore stepped inside and the door hummed shut. The vestibule was a small box-like room with a visi screen. He pressed the black button at the base. First spacer Lore to see the commander, he said as Zark's face blurred into focus. Come in, Lore. Come in, Zark bellowed. The heavy door swung open and Lore stepped in, heels clicking, hands slapping the holster before the commander's desk. First spacer Lore reporting. Sir. Zark rose and came toward him. Lore, my son, how are you? They grabbed each other's shoulders, laughing like children. Despite his love for Beth and the trouble, Lore was happy. Let me look at you. It's been eons since the Daeulis fair, dying to get her hands on you again. He winked. And I imagine you are too. She's here. A ray of panic touched him. Not that I know, unless a ship came in. Last I heard, she was waiting for a ship from Mars. She swears she'll get you this time, or she's going home to find an old mushel gatherer. Lore laughed with Zark, who pulled a flask of wine from his desk. He poured 2 tumblers of milk white wine, winking, from the home planet Malawine. I'll wager you haven't tasted it. Not since Thesta, Lore said. Accepting the tumbler, he raised it to you, sir, and your daughter. May she be spared from marrying a mushel gatherer. They drank the mellow wine. Now then, Lore, tell me what that fool Imri did. He told the commander everything, leaving out Beth. Zark's eyes burned with indignation. I'll see Imri tortured by Thistians for this trick. The old man stopped his tirade. You know what this means, Lore? I'm afraid to guess. The wrecked ship can be covered up. Terran politics help. We'll have men in Washington mumble. They'd call it experimental aircraft. Remove everyone except our people, then move the ship. But these Terrans are another matter. If they can get people to listen, we're in trouble. Perhaps, Lore said, if they were believed, it would speed relations. Zark shook his head. No, they're not ready. Half believe in superstition, the other half understands science. Others tried same tactics, were not believed. To tell the truth, I'm not sure what to do. We could continue the bluff. Zark lifted brows. You mean continue as our agent down there? Yes, sir. The crash supported the story, I told Danson's wife. I really had amnesia. No one knows anything, except the ship. Bryce found the watch, but we could trick his memory. It'd be risky. Might be best to kill both and send you back to the Terran woman. After bluffing Imri's plan, we arrange an accident with real Danson. Does the woman suspect anything? I don't think so, Lore said. She's too happy to have me back. Zark smiled, clamped a hand to his shoulder. You're tired. Rest. Use first spacer thesis quarters. Danson is in yours. And Bryce, unconscious, in the hospital. The shock has him recalling every old wives' tale. All right, sir. I'll get to my quarters. Thank you. I'll send Yella if she comes in. Thank you. Lore finished dressing himself, buckling the black belt about his waist. Then he looked down at the still form of Zark's daughter Yella, golden in the light of the overhead bulb. She slept like a baby. He blew a kiss to her and let his breath out in a rush. If everything goes right, I'll be back before you know I'm gone. If not, he let it hang there and checked the loads in the auto pistol. Then he went out into the bright light of the corridor. The guard merely accepted his auto pistol. When he stopped at the door to Danson's prison, Lore gave it to him, and the spacer opened the door. Nick Danson rubbed the beard on his face and grinned. Forget something, first spacer? He asked. When the door closed, Lore said, Shut up, Danson blinked. Sit down, Danson sat. How badly do you want off this ship? How badly do you want to make commander? Danson countered and lit a cigarette. You willing to risk your life? Why not? It isn't worth a hell of a lot anyhow. Lore reached into Danson's shirt pocket, found the pack of cigarettes and filched one. Nick touched a match to it and Lore dragged the smoke into his lungs slowly. He could see the Terran regarding him suspiciously. What's the play, first spacer? Danson asked. You're dead, Nick, if you stay on this ship. That's the truth. That can be either literally or figuratively speaking. I don't know. It all depends on Zark's plans for you. Nick snorted. Hell, it can't be worse than Imri's plans. It'll be better. Zark is a just man, but he hasn't much feeling for Terrans. Yeah, I know. The God theory. Laura nodded. Your concern touches me, but why? Laura grinned. I've been asking myself that same question, and while I can get answers that make sense to me, I doubt they'd make sense to you. Let's just say I like you. That's rich, but I'll buy it. All I've got to lose is my chains and your memory. Come again. Laura sucked on the cigarette. You can't talk except to your wife. Who'd believe me anyhow? It's bigger than that. If you talk to anyone, I'll kill you. You don't make sense. Why not kill me now? Imri made a mistake. I got caught. This whole operation is fouled up because of what he did. If we don't try to put things back, it'll be tough. For the first time, Tara has possession of a scout ship. Not only that, but they know it. They're hot on our trail. If enough Terrans get wise to us, we'll be in trouble. You've read my journals. You know what it's like up here. My planet needs Earth as a trade base. If you people ever wake up, we'll help each other a hell of a lot. Maybe that's why I want to take you back to your wife. Enough. Danson nodded. I guess so. I know enough to tell you're either honest or a damned good liar. What's the plot? The plot is to get you and Bryce back to Earth. Bryce? Nolan Bryce, he's here. Lore nodded. He found your watch where my scout ship cracked up and guessed who I was before I did. He came in shooting. My people kidnapped him. Both Beth and I thought I was you. She tried to help me figure things out. Bryce wanted me dead. Great Danson muttered bitterly. In any event, I think I can get Bryce to the scout ship. I'm relying on you to spring yourself out and get down to the hangar. You'll pass for me easily, okay? How do I get past the guard? I'll fix it. If I can't, I'll be back. Okay, Buck Rogers, it's your show. Lore grinned. Keep your fingers crossed, he said and left. I won't do it, Narvi said flatly. He lifted his glass and swallowed deep. You've got to, Lore insisted. It's the only way to straighten things out, you know it. You talked to Zark. How can I tell him? What should I say? That I love a Terran and want her happy. Thunder and lightning. They're only Terrans. Forget it, Lore. This woman will find someone else. If you take them back, they'll talk. No, they won't. Danson understands. He knows how badly we want to trade with his people. He'll help us. What about Bryce? Narvi snorted. Bryce can be handled by Danson. If not, we'll threaten him. I want you to take the guard's place outside the cell. Give me time to steal a scout ship. Yes, Narvi groaned. If I keep doing these goofy things, I'll never make commander, not even vice commander. Lore smiled. Don't worry. If things work out, you'll have had a hand in opening a new planet for our trade rockets. Narvi sighed. All right, I'll do it. But I should have my head examined. Lore grinned, finished his drink. It'll work out, Narvi. You'll probably get a medal. A prison cell, likely. Narvi snorted. Lore slapped his arm and left the wardroom. He had a lot to do, and damned little time to do it in. Lore left the wardroom and walked along the hollow, brightly lighted corridors toward the hospital where Detective Nolan Bryce was being kept a prisoner. He would be the tough one of the two, because his mental roots were still very close to the witchcraft-believing parents who had given him birth. Bryce was a Pennsylvanian, fairly intelligent, but like all Pennsylvanians, he had an unconscious closeness with tradition, stoutly denying superstition, yet avoiding ladders. How would he react to Lore's proposal? Would he stubbornly tell him to go to hell, or would he cooperate? It was a difficult thing to predict with certainty. Lore shoved the door to the hospital open and grinned at the spacer behind the desk. You've a Terran here, he asked. The spacer nodded and set down his papers. Yes, sir, we have one. He's in the care of Dr. Zulo. What are they doing to him? I'm not sure. I imagine they're giving him rehabilitative treatment. Lore grinned. Apparently the method by which they had snatched the detective had unnerved him. I'd like to see him. Where can I find Dr. Zulo? I'm sorry, sir. Only authorized personnel can interrogate him. I'm authorized. I believe I captured him. I'm Lore. The young spacer flushed, embarrassed. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know who you were. You may go through there. Straight down the corridor until you reach the 4th ward. Dr. Zulo will be there. I think so, thank you. Lore shoved the door open and walked down the long hall toward the 4th ward. not quite sure how to spring the Terran from hospital, but it had to be done. If he failed and they all ended up dead or in penal colonies, the trade program with Terra would be set back 50 years. Wasted. The wrecked scout ship could be covered up, but the loss of Bryce and Danson would not go unnoticed, especially when Beth spilled her story about the cabin. Terra might not corroborate her story, yet they were on verge of space travel and were warlike. They could cause all kinds of unnecessary trouble in space. It had to work. He had to get both of them back to the planet, even if it meant stopping a slug from an auto rifle. He reached the door to the 4th ward. Inside, Dr. Zulo was the only man in the small anteroom. "What can I do for you, First Spacer?" "I'm Dr. Zulo, I'm Lore." They stared at each other. The doctor's small bird-like eyes studied his face. "Lore, huh? You the one who went down there?" "I was in the accident. In a sense, I brought Bryce up here. You know him?" "Yes. At least I think I know him better than you people do." "Then perhaps you can help us." He arrived in acute shock, almost violent. He kept screaming about witchcraft and Terran nonsense. We treated him as best we could and he stopped acting like a wild man. "How is he now?" Lore asked. "Numb. He's sitting on his bed, staring at the wall. He isn't insane." "I don't think so, but he's strained and shocked. He's not of the same structure as the other." Lore sighed. "I'll see what I can do. Commander Zark has plans for him." Another switch, the doctor's disgust showed. "An accident, I believe. From bad to worse." Lore motioned for the doctor to show him the Terran. Zulo nodded toward a door at the far end of the ward. A blue uniformed spacer stood guard before it. "I want to see the Terran, Spacer," Lore said briskly. The guard opened the door. Lore stepped inside, listening to the lock click behind him. Bryce sat on the bed. He stared at the wall, jaws tight, determined to betray nothing. His fingers laced, his clothing rumpled. "Nolan," Bryce swung his eyes to him. "I'll kill you." "Nolan, listen. I'm here to help you. You've done a lot of helping, spacemen. I know what you want, Earth. Don't be silly. I want to help you and Danson back. I don't need you. Shut up and listen. I'm risking my neck. In a minute, I'll call the garden. We'll take his uniform, head for a scout ship, and get you home. This is some kind of trick. Do you want to go, or stay here? I don't have time to lecture you. I'll leave it up to Danson. Play it your way," Bryce said. "Okay." Lore called through the door. "Pistol ready." "Come in here, Spacer." The guard entered. "What is it, First Spacer?" "Him." As he turned, Lore struck hard. The guard grunted and dropped, his auto rifle clattering. If all was right, Danson was already heading to the hangar. "Come on, Nolan, get into these clothes." They stripped the guard quickly. Soon Bryce wore the blue uniform, buckled the cartridge belt, and gripped the auto rifle eagerly. "Hand me his helmet," he said. Lore picked it up to hand over. You saw the punch coming, but too late. Bryce's fist smashed into his face and sent him flying onto the bed. "Thanks," Bryce snarled. Lore rolled to the floor, head reeling. He heard the door close, and Bryce's running feet fading. "You damned fool," he thought. "You can't get off this ship alone." He staggered up and started running after the Terran, drawing his pistol as he ran. Lore dashed down the hallway into the main corridor, passing the limp body of the doctor and the young spacer who had been on duty at the desk. Apparently, Bryce had come into the place fast, swinging the auto rifle like it was a club. Both of the men were unconscious, but there was no blood in sight. "Crazy fool," Lore said aloud and slammed the door as he dashed into the corridor. Bryce was running blindly, his footsteps echoing off the metal walls. "Bryce, stop." Lore fired the auto pistol over the fleeing man's head. Bryce stopped and whirled, dropping to one knee to bring up the rifle he carried. He snapped off a fast burst, and Lore dived across the polished corridor to hug the wall. He rolled, pistol zeroed on the Terran, but he couldn't shoot. Nolan Bryce, however, had no scruples about firing. He cursed as the bullets missed. Beyond him, 4 spacers came running down the hall toward Bryce. One of them fired. Bryce whirled, spotted them, and brought up his rifle. Gunfire boomed in the hall like a machine gun being fired in a steel cave. Laura saw a spacer slam backwards, rolling crazily from the impact of Bryce's bullet. The Terran hunched over in a crouch, shooting from the hip like a gunfighter. Suddenly Bryce jerked upright, spun crazily in 2 directions at once, and fell flopping to the floor. The auto rifle clattered from his hands as he dropped. Lore rose slowly and shoved his gun back into its holster. He walked to where Bryce stared at the ceiling through unseeing eyes. A damned shame, but his fault. One spacer looked at him. "Are you all right, sir?" Lore nodded. "Is he a spacer?" Another asked, eyeing the uniform. "An escaped Terran," Lore said. He remembered Danson was probably down at the hangar. "Don't jettison this body until I give you orders. Put it in quick freeze." "Yes, sir," came the reply. But Lore was already heading down the corridor. Nothing could be done for Bryce now. Perhaps it was better this way. The shooting had helped clear his path. He found a vacant elevator and took it down to the hangar level. The door opened and he raced out, nearly upsetting a startled spacer in his headlong rush. He had no idea how long it would be before Narvi's release of Danson was discovered. Bursting into the repair bin area, he glanced toward the blast tubes. Incoming ships used the large port at the mothership's side. But to leave, a small craft had to be installed into a blast tube on either side of the hangar. Scanning frantically, he spotted Danson, disguised in first spacer blue and yellow, standing near a blast tube. He hoped no mechanic noticed the dangerous trick. Lore grabbed a mechanic by the arm. "Spacer, I'm on an urgent mission. Where can I get a ship?" The youth thought a moment, then pointed. "That tube, sir." "Thank you. I'll help you rig it," the spacer offered. "Never mind. I'll do it myself. Go back to work." The puzzled spacer obeyed, still glancing back. Lore motioned to Danson and hurried toward the tube door. Mechanics turned their heads as the Terran ran. "Hurry," Lore urged, yanking the door open wide. Danson reached him, panting. "Where's Bryce?" Lore slammed the door, whirled the spider lock. Through the port, spacers pointed and gestured toward the tube. "Where's Bryce?" "He's dead," Lore snapped. A vice commander had entered the hangar. "Get in the ship fast." Outside, workers milled like a swarm of bees. Danson stood frozen beside the scout ship, disbelief in his eyes. "Get in," Lore shouted. "Not without Bryce." Nick's face was wild with anger and refusal. "I'm not leaving, Nolan. Get out of my way." He lunged. Lore swung hard with a savage 1-2. Left fist to the stomach, right smashing Nick's jaw. Danson slammed into the ship, crumpling unconscious. Lore wasted no time, hauling his limp body up the ladder into the cockpit and strapping him in tightly. The emergency door loomed at the far end of the tube. If he pushed the wall button now, 30 seconds later the port would open, sucking the air into space. Anyone without pressurization would die. He stuffed Danson into the seat, left the canopy open, leaped down, and slammed his hand against the wall button. Lore 3 mechanics had slipped inside. Panicked, he drew his pistol and fired. The blast echoed like a firecracker in a steel drum. They bolted in fear. Lore slammed the button. Locks clanged. He had 30 seconds now. Diving into the cockpit, he slammed the canopy shut, twisted the lock, and hit the controls. Engines whined to life as the massive port rolled open, stars blazing beyond. He shoved the throttle forward and the scout ship surged into the void of space. His hands worked the stick, feet kicking pedals, rolling the ship toward Earth's glowing ball. Behind him, the mothership lit up in furious flashes of light. Tiny sparks lifted, fluttered, and followed like a swarm of bees, streaking after him across the blackness. They were giving chase. He had thought there would be a pursuit. He kicked at the rudder pedals and threw the stick. The scout ship rolled and plunged toward the ice cap. At 16,000 meters, ph, the rocket was little more than a guided missile. He knew when he reached the ice cap, he'd have to throttle back. Beside him, Nick Danson's head lolled as the ship streaked toward Earth. Four scout ships fanned out behind, holding him at bay at 16,500 meters. P.H. He wished he could stymie the chase, but starships weren't built to be sabotaged. Designers had fitted them with every device to prevent crippling. "I've got to lose them," he thought feverishly. "Long enough to get Danson back to the cabin and get out again. After that, they can have me." He looked back, trying to tell if they meant to fire. Weapons weren't a scout ship's strength. Each carried a rocket launcher, but relied on speed. The heavy caps of Greenland's ice loomed before him. He hoped to lose them in the white wilderness. They saw his intent and poured power into their ships. Lore flattened into a shallow dive and shoved the throttle. 24,000 meters. P.H. The ice rose fast. One scout ship closed and fired a rocket at him. He kicked the rudder, threw the ship left. It fluttered aside as the rocket burned and arced beneath his belly. He cut speed, yanking at the stick. The maneuver was too fast. They flashed past in silver streaks. Struggling to correct, he sliced toward the Azores, whirling atmosphere ripping at his hull. They'd soon have to break radio silence. At 15,000 miles per hour, a microsecond's delay could smash two ships into atomized wreckage. Still, they held. He shoved the stick forward, diving toward the ocean. He had the advantage. They had to anticipate his moves to get him into their sights to fire. A rocket speared toward him. He flipped right in a slow roll, barely evading it. Sickened, he flattened out 50 feet above the Atlantic's waves. Then he firewall throttled, racing north. The speed gauge froze at 24,500 meters. P.H. The others pushed their throttles, barely keeping him within range. They couldn't fire, he was too fast. Any rocket would be outrun, or worse, they'd fly into their own weapon. That was his greatest shield in the chase. Nick awoke, staring wide-eyed at the blur of ocean. His mouth opened. Lore looked ahead. A freighter loomed. He yanked the ship up, screaming over it. Behind, the others streaked over. He imagined the terrified crew, knocked flat by the wash of ships. Danson had fainted. Ahead lay a heavy cloud cover. He tore into the clouds, dodging recklessly, changing course to shake pursuit. Bursting out the far side, he saw no ships. He streaked for Pennsylvania. With Danson still out cold, he throttled back and hovered over the mountain cabin. It looked like a toy house in the clearing, sunlit and deserted. He landed in a nearby clearing, cut engines, threw back the canopy, unbuckled Danson, and slung him over his shoulder toward the quiet cabin. Inside, he dumped Nick on the couch and started pulling off the borrowed uniform. A footstep sounded. He whirled around, heart leaping in shock. She stood there and stared at the two of them, her face showing she was not sure which one was her husband. Lore rose, unsure what to say or do. "Beth, don't explain, Lore," she said calmly, as though men from outer space visited her cabin every afternoon without surprise or alarm. "I brought him back," Lore began awkwardly, feeling foolish. He wondered vaguely how she had known the truth about him being a spaceman from the start. She came closer, eyes boring into his. "Why did you bring him back? You could have come by yourself and continued the whole thing without him." Realization dawned on him slowly. "You know about me." "How?" "I'll tell you later." "Why did you bring him back?" she demanded, calm but firm. "You want him, don't you? It couldn't work out. Any fool can see that." He gripped her shoulders. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way, Beth. We never figured on the scout ship being wrecked. And I never figured on falling in love with you. That's why you brought him back. Because you love me." He nodded, emotion trembling within him. "I thought about taking his place, Beth, but I knew it wouldn't work. It was half crazy from the start." She smiled faintly. "Don't be sorry. I'm glad I know the truth. Now Bryce vanishing doesn't seem so ridiculous." She looked around. "Where is he?" "Dead." Her eyes widened. Laura explained, "I disobeyed orders. When I tried to free Bryce, he went berserk and one of the spacers shot him down." "Poor Nolan," she whispered tearfully. Then sharply, "You acted against orders." He nodded. "What will happen to you?" "Nothing. It'll be all right." "But Beth, how did you know?" "Who told you?" "I did." Laura spun to see a husky blonde in a dress suit at the door. His hand dropped to his pistol. "Don't bother, Laura," the blonde grinned. "I'm not about to draw. Who are you?" "Here, I'm Cartwell, Secret Service." "But really, I'm First Base." "You told her?" Laura asked. The blonde nodded. "I had to. She was ready to call police after you vanished. Only thing to keep her quiet was the truth." Laura bit his lip. "How do things stand?" "Not too bad," Cartwell said. "I arranged to have the wreck hauled off. It'll be hush-hush, then forgotten." "What about Bryce?" "Unavoidable. We'll cover by saying he got lost, searching with rescue squads. People will draw their own conclusions. Risky, Lore muttered. It'll work, Cartwell replied. Unless you have a better idea. Lore shook his head. You handle things down here. I've my problems up there. I'd better get Danson's uniform off and move. Beth caught his arm. Let him keep it, Lore. I promise it won't fall into wrong hands. Cartwell nodded. Let them have it, Cartwell agreed. They're on our side. All right, Lore said. He paused. I'll be going. Beth linked her arm in his warmly. I'd like to walk to the ship with you. I'd like that. He grinned at Cartwell, then led her outside into sunlight. They walked silently to the clearing. At the ship, Beth pulled his head down and kissed him. Goodbye, Lore. I'll come back, Beth. One day our peoples will be friends, and we'll meet again. I hope so. He looked skyward and saw 2 scout ships flashing above the clouds. My escort, he grinned. You'll have trouble. No, I'll marry the commander's daughter. Is she beautiful? Yes, he said, catching Beth's hurt glance. He smiled softly. Almost as beautiful as you. He kissed her again, then leaped to the cockpit. He motioned her away from the blast area and eased the ship up above the trees. She waved, looking very small among them. He lifted a hand in farewell. Then he swung the ship upward, slamming the throttle forward to head back to the starship. Leaving Beth behind in the clearing, tears bright in her eyes. In the end, the love lives of the gods were never just about passion or pleasure. They shaped myths, started wars, and even changed the fate of mortals. Behind every affair, every secret desire, lay the roots of power, jealousy, and destiny itself. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden side of mythology, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to keep exploring more stories like this, a simple like and subscribe will help this channel grow and bring you even more legends worth telling. Thank you for being here on now. Until the next story.